The East River catches the morning light differently here, where the Williamsburg waterfront meets the water. On Kent Avenue, between South 2nd and South 3rd Streets, a massive brick fortress rises above the shoreline. For more than a century, this building pulsed with the heat and fury of industrial ambition. Inside these walls, men worked through sweltering summers and bitter winters, transforming raw Caribbean sugarcane into the white crystals that sweetened America's coffee, cakes, and dreams. This is the story of Brooklyn's Domino sugar refinery, the forgotten empire of the Sugar King, and the thousands of workers who built one of the most powerful industries in American history. In 1807, when New York City was still a modest port town, two German immigrants stepped off a ship with a singular vision. William Havemeyer and his brother Frederick Christian had learned the sugar trade in London, working in the refineries that processed cane from Britain's colonial holdings. They saw opportunity in the young American Republic. Raw sugar arrived daily from the Caribbean plantations, but few facilities existed to refine it into the pure white sugar that consumers demanded. The Havemeyer brothers opened their first refinery on Vandam Street in Manhattan, in a building measuring just 30 feet by 40 feet. It was humble, almost laughably small compared to what would come later. For decades, the business grew steadily. By the 1840s, that modest lot had transformed into a 10-story complex occupying an entire city block. But Manhattan was crowded. The brothers needed space, deep water access for the massive ships carrying raw sugar, and most importantly, they needed workers. Lots of workers. In 1855, Frederick's son, Frederick Christian Havemeyer Jr., looked across the East River to the village of Williamsburg. The area had just been incorporated into Brooklyn, and its waterfront remained largely undeveloped. The East River ran deep here, deep enough for the largest cargo vessels. Land was cheap. Labor was abundant. Frederick Jr. purchased property on Kent Avenue and built the first Williamsburg refinery in 1856. The complex quickly dwarfed the Manhattan operation. Ships from Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Louisiana could dock directly at the facility's wharves, their holds packed with raw sugar still sticky with molasses. Longshoremen hauled the cargo into massive warehouses where it awaited processing. Within a few years, several other refineries joined Havemeyer on the Brooklyn waterfront. By 1870, Williamsburg produced more than half of all refined sugar consumed in the United States. The neighborhood had become the sugar capital of the world. But success bred vulnerability. On January 8, 1882, at the height of winter, disaster struck. Fire erupted in the refinery complex with devastating speed. The building that housed the main refining equipment and finishing operations, measuring 200 feet by 150 feet, became an inferno. Warehouses packed with sugar fed the flames. The Brooklyn Daily Eagle called it one of the most destructive conflagrations ever witnessed in the city. Workers fled into the frozen streets. Flames lit the night sky so brightly that people in Manhattan could read newspapers by the glow. The fire destroyed equipment worth millions. Between 1,200 and 2,000 workers lost their jobs instantly. Sugar prices across the nation spiked overnight as supply contracted. Theodore Havemeyer, Frederick's son, stood in the smoking ruins and made a decision that would define his family's legacy. Rather than simply rebuild what had been lost, he would construct the largest, most advanced sugar refinery the world had ever seen. He sold stocks and bonds, leveraged insurance payments, and poured $7 million into the project. For 18 months, construction crews swarmed the waterfront. They built a new complex designed to be fireproof, with thick brick walls, iron shutters, and the latest safety equipment. The centerpiece was the filter, pan, and finishing house, a structure so massive and so tall that it would dominate the Brooklyn skyline for generations. When the new refinery opened in July 1883, the Brooklyn Daily Eagle proclaimed it the largest of its kind on the face of the globe. The building stood 155 feet tall, making it the tallest structure on the Brooklyn waterfront, rivaling the early skyscrapers rising in Manhattan's financial district. 7 buildings covered a quarter of a square mile. Inside, the refinery employed 3,000 workers and consumed 800 tons of coal every single day. The facility could produce 13,000 barrels of sugar daily. 650 ships arrived each year to unload raw sugar at the Havemeyer docks. The refining process was brutal, dangerous, and exhausting. Raw sugar arrived dark brown, contaminated with dirt, insects, and plant matter from the tropical fields where enslaved and later exploited laborers harvested the cane. In the filter house, the lowest level of the complex, workers mixed the raw sugar with water and lime to create a murky syrup. This mixture flowed through enormous canvas filters and then through massive tanks filled with bone charcoal made from animal bones that absorbed impurities. The heat in these rooms reached 140 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. In summer, it became a circle of industrial hell. Men worked stripped to the waist, their bodies glistening with sweat, breathing air thick with sugar dust and steam. The sugar dust coated everything, settling on skin, clogging lungs, creating a constant risk of explosion. Dust explosions rocked refineries across Brooklyn with terrifying regularity. Workers kept buckets of water nearby, not just for drinking, but to douse themselves when the heat became unbearable. Some collapsed, some died, their bodies carried out quietly so production wouldn't stop. The average worker earned $13 per week, barely enough to rent a cold water tenement flat with no outside windows and a shared toilet in the back courtyard. Boys and girls as young as 12 worked for $6 a week, hauling sacks, sweeping floors, doing whatever the foreman demanded. From the filter house, the partially refined sugar moved upward through the building. In the pan house, workers boiled the syrup in enormous copper kettles, evaporating water until crystals began to form. This was skilled work, requiring constant attention and precise timing. Too much heat and the sugar would burn, too little and it wouldn't crystallize properly. The pan operators developed an almost supernatural sense for their kettles, knowing by sight and smell exactly when each batch reached perfection. The crystals moved to the finishing house at the top of the structure, where they were dried, graded by color and purity, and prepared for packaging. If you want to hear more stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. We bring history to life, one forgotten story at a time. The entire process exploited gravity. Raw sugar entered at ground level, moved upward through filtering, boiling, and crystallizing, then descended as finished product to the packaging facilities. Workers hauled heavy loads up and down stairs in suffocating heat. The 12-hour workday was standard, with 2 additional hours of overtime required on most days. There were no weekends. There were no sick days. If you couldn't work, someone else took your place. In 1886, the workers had enough. 3,000 men walked off the job, shutting down not just the Havemeyer Refinery, but sugar plants across Williamsburg and into Greenpoint. The strikers demanded union recognition, a reduction from 12 to 10-hour workdays, and a raise to $1.75 per day. It seemed reasonable. The refineries were making enormous profits. The Havemeyer family lived in Manhattan mansions, collected fine art, hobnobbed with the Astors and Vanderbilts. Surely they could afford to treat their workers with basic dignity. The owners refused every demand. They hired replacement workers. They called in the police, who fought pitched battles with strikers in the streets. Newspapers portrayed the strikers as troublemakers, radicals, threats to the social order. The Havemeyers had wealth, they had influence, they had time. The workers had none of those things. After weeks without wages, with families going hungry, the strikers returned to work defeated. Nothing had changed except the bitterness that now poisoned relations between labor and management. The Havemeyer family was accumulating power beyond Brooklyn. In October 1887, Henry Osborne Havemeyer, Frederick's grandson and now head of the family empire, organized something unprecedented. He gathered the owners of sugar refineries across the country and proposed a consolidation. Together, they would form the Sugar Refineries Company, more commonly known as the Sugar Trust. This cartel would control supply, fix prices, divide markets, and squeeze out competition. Within a few years, the Sugar Trust controlled 98% of sugar production in the United States. In 1891, after passage of the Sherman Antitrust Act, they reorganized as the American Sugar Refining Company, but the monopoly remained intact. The Havemeyers snaked like a gigantic octopus from the Caribbean to Brooklyn, across the United States to the Philippines. Henry Osborne Havemeyer was brilliant, ruthless, and utterly devoid of compassion for the workers who made his fortune. He manipulated tariffs, paying politicians to lower taxes on imported raw sugar, while maintaining high tariffs on refined sugar from foreign competitors. He undercut rivals with vicious price wars, losing money temporarily to drive competitors into bankruptcy, then raising prices once his monopoly was secure. He made rebate arrangements with wholesalers and railroads, creating an interlocking web of corruption that funneled money into American sugar coffers. In 1896, the company became one of the original 12 stocks in the Dow Jones Industrial Average, a testament to its dominance of American industry. The workers at the Brooklyn Refinery remained poor, overworked, and vulnerable. In 1900, the refinery changed its name to highlight the Domino brand, and Henry Osborne Havemeyer invented the small cardboard carton and the domino-sized sugar cubes that became ubiquitous in American households. The iconic yellow domino sign, with a star dotting the letter I, rose above the refinery, visible for miles. At night, lit by electric lights, it glowed like a beacon of American prosperity. But that prosperity remained concentrated in very few hands. The refinery employed 4,500 workers at its peak in 1919, making it one of Brooklyn's largest employers. Entire neighborhoods depended on the factory. Immigrants from Germany, Poland, Ireland, and eventually Puerto Rico found work at Domino. Families lived in the shadow of the refinery for generations, fathers and sons working the same brutal shifts, breathing the same sugar-laden air, developing the same lung diseases. The average length of employment was more than 8 years, remarkable given the conditions. Workers stayed not out of loyalty but out of necessity. The refinery offered steady work in uncertain times. In 1906, workers struck again, demanding a raise from 18 cents per hour to something that might allow them to support their families with dignity. The company had posted profits of $50 million that year. Henry Osborne Havemeyer refused. The strike collapsed. In December 1907, Henry Osborne died suddenly at age 60. He left behind an estate worth tens of millions, along with one of the great art collections in America. His widow, Louisine, continued building the collection with advice from her friend, the artist Mary Cassatt. When Louisine died in 1929, she bequeathed nearly 2,000 paintings, sculptures, and decorative objects to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, a gift that art historians consider among the greatest any museum has ever received. The workers who made that gift possible remained poor. The factory continued operating through world wars, the Great Depression, and dramatic social changes. During the 1920s, demand began declining as new refining technologies emerged and other facilities opened across the country. By 1959, employment had fallen to 1,500 workers. The company changed names repeatedly, becoming Amstar in 1970, then Domino Sugar Corporation after British firm Tate & Lyle purchased it in 1988. By 1996, only 450 people worked at the facility. The refinery changed its process to save money. Rather than refining raw sugar from start to finish in Brooklyn, the company began pre-processing sugar at a plant in Baltimore, then shipping liquid sugar to Williamsburg for final finishing. The iconic smell of boiling sugar that had perfumed the neighborhood for over a century began to fade. Production declined further. The refinery was dying. In June 1999, when their union contracts expired, 284 workers went on strike. Tate & Lyle had announced plans to eliminate 100 jobs and weaken union protections. The workers demanded job security, fair wages, and dignity. The strike lasted 20 months, making it one of the longest labor disputes in New York City history. The company operated at reduced capacity, bringing in replacement workers, waiting out the strikers. In February 2001, the strike ended. Over 100 workers had defected and returned to work. The remaining strikers agreed to the company's terms. 110 positions were eliminated. 3 years later, on a cold day in 2004, the machine stopped. The boilers cooled. The conveyors fell silent. The Domino Sugar Refinery closed its doors permanently after 148 years of continuous operation. 225 workers lost their jobs. The last major industrial operation on Brooklyn's East River waterfront was finished. For 10 years, the building sat empty. Photographers and urban explorers snuck past fences to document the decay. Inside the cavernous warehouses, machinery rusted. Pigeon droppings covered floors once swept clean daily. Hurricane Sandy flooded the lower levels in 2012, leaving high water marks on the walls. The buildings became a symbol of Brooklyn's vanished industrial past, a monument to the workers whose labor built America's sugar empire and received so little in return. Williamsburg was changing. The working-class neighborhood of Jewish, Eastern European, and Hispanic immigrants had become one of New York's hippest areas. Artists and young professionals moved in, drawn by relatively cheap rents and proximity to Manhattan. Boutique shops replaced bodegas. Luxury condos rose where warehouses once stood. The Domino sugar complex represented prime waterfront real estate, and developers circled like sharks. In 2012, Two Trees Management purchased the property for $185 million. They proposed transforming the site into a mixed-use development with residential towers, office space, and public parkland. Local residents fought over the plans. Some wanted preservation of the entire complex as a historic landmark. Others welcomed new development and the jobs it would bring. The debate grew contentious, exposing deep divisions about gentrification, memory, and who gets to decide a neighborhood's future. The New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission had designated the Filter, Pan, and Finishing House as a landmark in 2007, recognizing its historical significance and architectural importance. This building would be preserved, but the rest of the complex would be demolished. In 2013, demolition began. Massive excavators tore down warehouses, raw sugar storage facilities, and the network of buildings that had housed the refinery's operations. Clouds of dust rose above the waterfront. Each crash of falling brick echoed the end of an era. The Filter, Pan, and Finishing House was gutted completely. Only the brick shell remained, those thick walls blackened by more than a century of molasses residue, a living testament to the building's industrial past. Inside, architects from Practice for Architecture and Urbanism inserted a gleaming 15-story glass tower, creating a striking contrast between old and new. The renovated building opened in 2023 as the Refinery at Domino, an all-electric office building with a dramatic vertical garden and modern amenities. The heavy industrial past preserved as a picturesque shell around luxury workspaces. In 2018, Domino Park opened along the waterfront. The 5-acre park honors the diversity and resilience of generations of Domino workers, opening this stretch of East River shoreline to the public for the first time in over 160 years. Salvaged artifacts from the refinery dot the landscape. Two 80-foot-tall gantry cranes that once unloaded bulk sugarcane from freight ships stand as sculptures. 21 columns from the raw sugar warehouse line and elevated walkway, screw conveyors that moved crystallized sugar through the refinery, now serve as curious monuments to industrial archaeology. Visitors to Domino Park today enjoy waterfront views, volleyball courts, a dog run, and places to eat. Children play where workers once hauled 100-pound sacks of sugar in suffocating heat. Couples take selfies against backdrops of preserved machinery, treating history as aesthetic, ignorant of the blood, sweat, and exploitation that machinery represents. The park is beautiful, thoughtfully designed, genuinely pleasant, but it's been sanitized. The brutal reality of industrial labor has been transformed into picturesque decay, suitable for Instagram, but divorced from the human cost of the sugar empire. The residential towers that rose around the refinery sold quickly despite eye-watering prices. One-bedroom apartments start at over $700,000. Penthouses cost millions. The residents are young professionals, tech workers, finance types, exactly the people displacing the working-class families who once depended on the refinery for survival. Williamsburg is no longer home to the people who built it. The transformation is complete. The story of Brooklyn's sugar refineries is ultimately a story about American capitalism's great contradiction. The Havemeyer family demonstrated extraordinary technical ingenuity, developing refining processes that transformed the industry. They showed business acumen that built one of the great American fortunes. They displayed philanthropy, donating art that enriches the Metropolitan Museum to this day. But these achievements were built on ruthless exploitation. Workers labored in dangerous conditions for poverty wages. Strikes were crushed. Monopolies manipulated markets. Politicians were bought. The wealth flowed upward while the costs, the heat, the dust, the injuries, the early deaths remained concentrated among the workers. This pattern repeated across American industry. The oil refineries that also dominated Brooklyn's waterfront, the steel mills of Pennsylvania, the textile factories of New England, all shared this same DNA. Innovation and exploitation, progress and poverty, existed side by side, two faces of the same industrial revolution. The Domino sugar refinery was not unique. It was typical. What makes the Domino story worth remembering is how it illuminates the relationship between labor and capital, between those who own and those who work, between the remembered and the forgotten. The Havemeyer name adorns streets in Williamsburg. Their art collection draws millions to the Met. But the thousands of workers who actually produced the sugar, who breathed the toxic air, who collapsed in the heat, who went on strike for dignity and lost, these people are largely forgotten. We don't know their names. We don't see their faces. History remembers the Sugar King but forgets his subjects. The transformation of the refinery into luxury apartments and office space represents another chapter in this ongoing story. Capital has once again triumphed, converting industrial space into profitable real estate. The workers are gone, displaced by rising rents and neighborhood change. The park and the preserved building fragment offer a sanitized version of history, aesthetically pleasing but fundamentally dishonest. They suggest continuity where there is rupture, progress where there is loss. Brooklyn's waterfront once pulsed with productive industry. Sugar refineries, oil refineries, rope factories, glass works, navy yards all employed thousands. These places were loud, dirty, dangerous, and absolutely vital to the people who worked there. They provided not just wages but identity, community, purpose. When they closed, something more than jobs disappeared. A way of life ended. The neighborhoods that grew around these industries were hollowed out, their populations dispersed, their character transformed beyond recognition. The current residents of the Domino development live in a neighborhood profoundly disconnected from its past. They benefit from waterfront access that workers never enjoyed despite building everything around them. They walk through Domino Park with dogs and strollers, largely unaware of the suffering that occurred on this exact ground. This ignorance is not their fault. It's structural. American culture excels at erasing uncomfortable histories, replacing them with palatable narratives about progress and renewal. But the old refinery still stands, its brick walls dark with the residue of sugar and history. If you look closely, if you let yourself see past the gleaming glass and the landscape park, traces of the past remain visible. The filter, pan, and finishing house looms over the waterfront, a fortress built by capitalist ambition and worker sacrifice. Inside those walls, generations of men and women transformed raw cane into refined sugar, and in doing so, helped build modern America. They deserve to be remembered not as statistics or abstractions, but as people who labored, struggled, organized, struck, and persisted, despite everything arrayed against them. The Domino sugar refinery operated for 148 years, from 1850 to 2004. At its peak, it refined 4 million pounds of sugar daily and employed 4,500 workers. It survived fires, strikes, world wars, economic depressions, and changing ownership. It was the largest sugar refinery in the world, the jewel in the crown of an empire that controlled 98% of American sugar production. It made the Havemeyer family fabulously wealthy and left thousands of workers with lung disease, poverty wages, and little recognition. Today, the refinery's story offers lessons about power, labor, memory, and transformation. It reminds us that every comfortable present rests on someone's uncomfortable past. The luxury apartments and office spaces now occupying the site exist because workers fought for 8-hour workdays, safer conditions, and living wages, battles largely lost at Domino but eventually won elsewhere through decades of struggle. The public park exists because communities demanded access to waterfronts long monopolized by industry. The preserved building exists because people argued that history matters, that some things shouldn't be erased entirely in the rush toward profit. The Domino sugar refinery is gone, but not forgotten. Its story continues to unfold in the tensions between preservation and development, memory and erasure, profit and people. Walking through Domino Park on a summer evening, watching families enjoy the waterfront, it's possible to feel both grateful for the public space and melancholy for what was lost. Both feelings are valid, both are necessary. History is not a simple story of progress from darkness to light. It's complicated, contradictory, contested. The brick walls of the filter, pan, and finishing house will stand for generations to come, blackened by molasses, scarred by age, hollow inside but imposing from without. They are a monument to American industry, American ambition, American exploitation. They are a reminder that every sweet thing comes with a bitter cost, that every fortune is built on someone's labor, that history is written by the victors but experienced by everyone. The forgotten refinery of the Sugar King is not really forgotten. It's just waiting for us to remember it honestly, completely, and with the complexity it deserves. If you enjoyed this deep dive into forgotten history, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue bringing these important stories to light. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.